When it comes to the genre of survival horror, few games are as revered and beloved as Silent Hill 2, having earned its status as a classic of horror storytelling and atmosphere. The game's reputation has always interested me, but it wasn't until quite recently that I felt a strong urge to experience such a genre-defying masterpiece by myself. The problem was that I simply was not worthy to experience such greatness, since I hadn't played its lesser-known predecessor, Silent Hill 1, a game that I can now say I thoroughly enjoyed, despite the many flaws regarding its gameplay and story. But what it did do really well was creating a tense and foreboding atmosphere. Few locations have sucked me in as deeply as the town of Silent Hill did. The game truly succeeded in making you feel lost and isolated in a town that just wants to consume you alive. And the amazing soundtrack by Akira Yamaoka left me at the edge of my seat more than a couple of times. It is overall a very solid game, but certainly had a lot of room for the sequel to improve upon, and so I went into Silent Hill 2 with a certain amount of expectations. And did the game in the end succeed in meeting them? Well, the answer might shock you, so let's get into it. Silent Hill 2 follows the journey of a man named James Sutherland, who ventures to a New England resort town called Silent Hill in search of his wife, Mary. The disturbing thing is that, according to James, Mary has been dead for 3 years, yet somehow managed to send him a letter that says to come find her in their special place, which, as stated by James, refers to the whole town of Silent Hill, and so it is our main objective to go find her and make some friends along the way. It's such a simple premise, but it is really effective in hooking you in with its central mystery of whether Mary truly is the one waiting for us, or if there's something more insidious going on. Silent Hill 1 had a similar premise, with us having to find our daughter Cheryl, but I found this to be much more effective, because it clearly sets up that there is more to this story yet to be revealed. Whereas with the first game, Cheryl is just some stupid kid who runs off by herself and forces us to go find her. The second game therefore does a much better job at setting the stakes and making the player as interested in this mystery as the player character. It's not just in the first few minutes that Silent Hill 2 hooks you in though. There's a whole section after you leave the observation deck on the way to Silent Hill that is incredibly tense and unnerving. The mastermind behind the first game's soundtrack, Akira Yamaoka, came back to the sequel with a heavy load of suspenseful ambience to kick off the game. You hear all these different noises in the background while you traverse the forest that give you the sense that something could jump out from behind a tree at any given moment. Yet it never does. There is nothing to relieve you of the stress of not knowing what is out there, and that unnerved the shit out of me. When we finally arrive in Silent Hill, we are left with no real sense of what to do, and so, much like the first game, we are forced to explore the mystery-ridden town, whilst being spoon-fed information as to what is really going on. This could have easily made the game feel tedious and boring, but it's saved by being a very compact experience, as you are often restricted with where you can go and what you can interact with. The most obvious example of this are the vast amount of inaccessible doors found in any given location, which greatly outshines the amount you can actually interact with. It has the drawback of making exploration feel less intriguing, but becomes a necessary evil to make sure that the player doesn't just run around aimlessly, without a clear sense of where to go next. That's not to say that exploration becomes a waste of time. It's certainly limited, but you'd be missing out on a ton of valuable loot if you don't take the time to look around you once in a while. They are usually not that hard to find either way, as whenever James stands near an enemy or an item in his vicinity, he will turn his head to look at it. It is an inclusion that I very much appreciate, and can even lead to some creepy moments, where James can see something outside our own field of view. I do have an issue surrounding the game's exploration though, and that is how rewarding it is. Healing items and ammunition can be found in abundance, even if you don't stray away from the path all that much. By the end of the game, I was drowning in all the medicine and ammo that I had saved up. Instead of using the long-range weapons that you can find, I instead opted to use the metal pipe that you can find early on, and if you have played the game before, you'd know that you can easily stunlock an enemy over and over again, so as long as you fight just one opponent, it's surprisingly easy to come out unscathed. Combat is easily one of the weakest aspects of Silent Hill 2, and it's one of the few things I honestly think the predecessor did better, as the enemy variety is far more interesting and requires you to actually time your attacks, unless you are dying to see the game over screen. It's a shame because the enemies in Silent Hill 2 are far more interesting with what they actually represent in the bigger narrative. In the first game, you fight things like rabid dogs and flying dinosaurs, which is pretty neat, but they don't serve a purpose other than being something you're meant to fight. Everything you come across in the second game, whether it be bobblehead nurses, living mannequins, or the iconic pyramid head, have some sort of meaning connected to them. They are not just freaks of nature, they symbolize something greater, and that is what makes their existence so captivating, and most of all, terrifying. Same can be said about the different characters you meet along the way. They may seem simplistic at first, but there is far more to them than meets the eye. James himself is proof of this. At first I thought of him as just another airhead, like the first game's Harry Mason, who walks up to mutilated corpses and goes, "What's this?" But with James, there is a reason for him acting this way, and once his past actions are revealed to you, you start seeing him in a completely different way. He is a really good protagonist, and one that becomes increasingly more interesting as the game progresses. I am being deliberately vague about a lot of things, just in case any of you watching hasn't played the game, but it does an amazing job at telling a deeply disturbing story of a deeply disturbed man. It's probably the main factor as to why Silent Hill 2 is still so widely talked about to this day. That and the incredible atmosphere that seeps into every fiber of this haunting but beautiful world that the people over at Konami were able to create. Again, I have to mention Akira Yamaoka's absolutely incredible work on the music and sound design. It still holds up immaculately, striking the balance between being both scary and soothing at the same time. It's really impressive. Much like its predecessor, Silent Hill 2 is a very flawed game, but one that is still absolutely worthy of being considered a horror game classic. And so, yes, the game did meet my expectations in a lot of aspects, which to many of you is probably a big shocker, I know. Despite a step backwards in terms of the game's combat, it is otherwise a big improvement, with a far more intriguing story and some highly appreciated quality of life improvements to its gameplay mechanics. The best example of this is probably the game's many puzzles, of which I haven't really addressed up to this point, simply because I don't want to accidentally reveal too much about them, but what I will say is that it is much clearer on how the game wants you to solve them than in Silent Hill 1, and I like the inclusion of having the player be able to choose the difficulty of the clues you receive. It's small things like that which I appreciated the most, because they do have a big impact on the game as a whole. I think it's still far from a masterpiece, but you can clearly see how the game has influenced the survival horror genre, and what the game does well, it does really well. Again, I could talk about the game's sound design and music for a lot longer, but I think I will leave it here for now. Thank you so much for watching this video. Feel free to leave your thoughts on the game in the comments below, as long as you are civil about it. Consider subscribing and liking the video if you enjoy hearing me talk to myself about stuff I'm interested in, and I'll hopefully see you in the next video.